episode, Jerry is dating this woman named Valerie, and he learns that the litmus test for their relationship is his ranking on her speed dial. So he begins at number 7. He takes her out on a date, and things go horribly wrong, and so he learns that he's actually now dropped down to number 9. He makes up for the bad date in, exuberance, and he rockets to number 1, which pleases him immensely. The problem is that Jerry has then replaced Valerie's stepmother. And in a confrontation with Jerry, she remarks, "It has taken me 13 years to reach the top of that speed dial, and I don't intend to lose my spot to you." And so begins the hilarity of the two jockeying for position on this speed dial. Preach it, sister. It's natural to rank things. We rank top-selling books, we rank movies, we rank restaurants and attractions, and as Seinfeld humorously depicts, we also rank people. Sometimes we rank ourselves. In our gospel reading today, Jesus challenges the disciples, and he challenges us to see our lives and our ministries not in terms of rank, not in terms of moving up that greatness scale as an attempt for some level of status or recognition. Instead, Jesus tells us to abandon the whole notion of ranking altogether. Instead of focusing on ourselves, on how we are perceived, on how we are seen or received or recognized, we are called simply to give ourselves to others in humble, loving service. So I invite you to pick up your Bibles and turn to the Gospel of Mark. Now, the thing about ranking is relationally based. That's to say that in order to rank something, there needs to be other things for which you are ranked against. You can't be number 1 unless there is a number 2 or 3 or 4. If that doesn't happen, you're not number 1, you're just alone. Right? There has to be others that you're ranking yourselves against. As Jerry Seinfeld moves up the speed dial, the implication was that he was more valuable, special, meaningful, and important than anybody else on that phone. And that was the very discussion that the disciples were having on the road to Galilee. Verse 33 says that they were arguing about who was the greatest. Now just notice what they're not arguing about, right? They're not talking about who is the greatest dancer, or who has the greatest hair, or who's the greatest singer. They're not talking about ability, right? It's great to have a skill and a talent, and it's okay to want to develop that talent as far as it will go, and even have that skill or talent recognized by others. But they're not talking about talent. They are talking about and arguing amongst themselves as to the manner in which they are perceived. They are talking about their personal value, their worth, and their importance. Disciple A is more important, more valuable, more loved than disciple B. And so implicit in the ranking, and when we rank ourselves as great, implicit in that is the ranking of others as not so great. And notice that the disciples were arguing. It wasn't friendly banter. They were intentionally, they were passionately, and they were forcefully asserting their worth and their value over and above the worth and value of another. To worry about rank is to focus only on furthering our own status rather than looking on how we can serve others. So Jesus tells them, if anyone wants to be first, they must be the very last. Notice Jesus doesn't just say last. Jesus says very last, right? Jesus talks in this extreme and radical language here. Did anybody catch, it was a couple weeks ago, there was a football game between the Edmonton Eskimos and the Hamilton Tiger Cats. Did anybody see that? Did anybody remember what the score was? Edmonton won by over 40 points, right? Like, there's coming in last, but then there's also coming in uncomfortably last, where you're not even thinking that you're playing the same game. Well, you know what? That's exactly what Jesus is saying. You know, there's a way to come in last, but still play the game, but still strive for that greatness, strive for that rank. Jesus tells us, don't even play the game. Don't even play the game. Completely forego any thought, any consideration or concern for your own status, and give yourself to the health and serving of others. He says that disciples of Jesus must be the servant of all. And in the Greek language, the word for servant is the same word as the word for slave. And Jesus is talking to people who have been raised in a system of honor and social ranking. There's a stark division between those who have status in that world and those who don't. For those who are free and have freedom, and those who didn't. Those who exist to serve. Those who are slaves. Jesus says to them, think of that lowest person that you can possibly think of, the lowest of the low, and serve that person. Being a follower of Jesus isn't about being a great person. It's not about being on the in with God in the sort of, it's not what you know, it's who you know kind of thing. It's not about that. Being a follower of Jesus is about loving people to such a radical degree that there is no person so low, no person so insignificant that we will not give everything we are to care for them, to help them, and to love them. And as a symbol of that, Jesus takes a child in his arms. And in verse 37, Jesus says, whoever welcomes one of these children in my name welcomes me. Whoever welcomes me does not welcome me, but the one who sent me. Now, we've probably all seen pictures of this. Jesus smiles as the ruddy little child cuddles in his arms, right? Jesus may even be laughing. The depiction here is serene and almost loving and heavenly. Children are cute and innocent. They are lovable and pure. They're kind of like, they're the biblical equivalent of Charlotte Brandstrom, right? Like, and how would you not want to welcome someone as cute as that, right? Here's the thing. In the Bible and in the ancient world, children weren't seen like that. There was no romanticized depiction of dimpled cheeks and scraped knees. Children, they had no power. They had no status. They had no rights. They were regarded more of the property of the father rather than any type of person. They were dependent. They were vulnerable. They were weak. They were helpless. They were unlearned. Rabbis of the day actually classified children in the same manner as the physically infirmed, those who were deaf, dumb, and weak-minded. Children were no better than the most lowly and insignificant slave. So Jesus takes the symbol of everything that the disciples are not. A symbol of those for whom 90% of the world would be greater than. And he says, you got to welcome, you got to love, and you got to serve them. So the reality is, you can only do that by a complete offering of your time and your dedication and your love. After all, that's what Jesus did. Our whole reading is prefaced by Jesus again telling the disciples about what would happen in Jerusalem, how the Son of Man was going to be betrayed into the hands of men, and they will kill him. And that's not coming in last. Jesus didn't just die. Jesus was brutally tortured and executed in the most public and shameful of ways. He didn't just come in last. Jesus came in very last. Jesus, the greatest of all the great, the one whose name outranks every other name in heaven and on earth, loved so completely that his life was nothing but service to others. And being a follower of Jesus and being part of the church is about living out that example. Not just in words, but in deed and in action. In the very giving of ourselves in service to others. Where are we called to give in service? Where are you called to give in service? One of the intriguing things about this reading is that it's set within the context of two healing stories. There's the healing of the boy with an evil spirit, and there's the story of somebody else doing healing for people. And you get the picture that while the world around the disciples is crying out for love and for healing, the disciples are too busy griping amongst themselves to notice it. They're too busy looking at their own greatness to see the reality of those in need around them. See, when we think about ourselves, we aren't loving others. Because we can't love others and be concerned with whether or not we are greater than they, or whether or not they will mess up our time or our worth. We can't look at someone else and believe that they are not worth our time, our energy, our care, and still believe that we are living the life that Jesus wants us to live. And if people around us are calling for help, are needy, and we are too busy boasting about how great we are to notice, then something is terribly missing. I remember hearing a story from friends of ours who went to a church. This wasn't in Calgary. They went to a church and they sat down and were all ready for the worship service when someone came along and said, excuse me, you're in our pew. Right? That's not loving people. That's not loving others. That's thinking only of ourselves. Right? That's not service. And so gracefully they got up and went to another pew. Same church, same day, same people. Someone else came to them and said, excuse me, you're in our pew. So they got up and they left. Charles Spurgeon, the 19th century Baptist preacher, said, "Love shows boasting to the door and bars its return." Our reading from James says we are to be pure and peace-loving, considerate, submissive, full of mercy and good fruit, impartial and sincere. The interesting thing about all those terms is that they're relational. It's about how we value, serve, respect, and love, and welcome other people. Now, as you know, we're looking at this building extension thing. An extension which somebody termed the welcoming arms of the church, which I think is a fabulous description of it. See, but here's the thing. What does it mean to welcome others? Who are we welcoming? And more importantly, what is their experience when they come? Do they meet people who give of themselves, who do everything that they can do to embody, display, and enact the love of God? Will they feel that they are supported by people who continually look for ways to support, to heal, to help, to empower one another? Or do they experience a body of insular, inward-focused, and self-congratulatory individuals? What is the church that God calls us to be? What is the disciple that God calls us, me and you, to be? In Jesus, God came to a people who were in need. He did not consider his greatness something to be wielded for his own glory or his own benefit, but he emptied himself in love, in service, and in sacrifice. And he calls us to live out that same dynamic. May we as a church and may we as individuals refuse to run the rat race of ranking and instead see and respond to those places in which we are called to serve.